Welcome to Stand in the Gap Today from the American Pastors Network. We proclaim truth in the public square by connecting a biblical worldview and constitutional principles to the most significant news of the day. Simple, careful, and truthful. That's Stand in the Gap Today. Now, here's your host.
Welcome to the program. I'm Pastor Isaac Crockett, and my co-host today is the Honorable Sam Rohr, the president of the American Pastors Network and the regular host of this program. On this Friday edition, it's our honor to have a returning friend and guest, the attorney Benjamin Sisney from ACLJ, the American Center for Law and Justice. And Ben is in his office right there in D.C., right across from the Supreme Court building. And if his glasses start to get fogged up, he said that lately it's been particularly swampy, and I think that can be used to describe the weather and maybe other things going on in D.C. But Ben, thank you so much for taking the time to join us today.
It's my honor to join y'all. Thank you for having me on.
Well, Ben, you and I have been communicating and about some different things going on, and you're there at the ACLJ, really the tip of the spear for many of the things going on, really across the world anymore, but especially in our nation when it comes to patriotic, God-fearing people having their rights trampled on and things. It's been a wonderful opportunity to see a Christian organization, Christian attorneys and things that are there to stand up for justice, because the Bible tells us that if we fear God and if we follow God, we should be offended at injustice. God has created us with that innate, understanding, and we are to seek justice and to seek righteousness. And I want to talk to you today about whistleblowers. The title of our program is actually Courageous Voices, Insights into Protecting the Rights of Whistleblowers. And I have been learning a lot from you just over the last few days, a lot of things I didn't understand, I didn't know. This is a topic, something that everybody's hearing about, definitely, on the news about these different whistleblowers, but understanding some of the process and how it's maybe not working the way I thought it should work. So if you could maybe just help us out, starting just kind of describing what a whistleblower is and what the legal rights or the legal system that is set up to somebody to rightfully be a whistleblower.
Absolutely. And again, thank you for having me on. And if you'll indulge me just for a second, I want to take a second. I appreciate your comment about the ACLJ being on the tip of the spear, and I get it. And I thank you for that. Of course, we couldn't do any of that without our supporters. But I actually want to return the compliment because, just the name of this network, American Pastors Network, the name of the show, and what you all do. And I've been on your show enough times to really understand and get to know you all. I can't emphasize how critical it is to have American pastors engaged, paying attention, educating their flocks across the country, and engaging these things. What happens in D.C., it can be yucky, it can be gross, but we can't ignore it. And least of all, the church. The American church can't ignore it. You can't just disregard it. This is something that's happening over there. It doesn't affect me, or maybe I don't like it, but there's nothing I can do about it. I'm just going to ignore it. That's the worst thing we can do. Of course, we got to approach it with a godly perspective, as you all do. But I'm just so grateful because I all too often come across, pastors or churches that are, politics is bad. We're not going to talk about it for whatever reason. And I'm so grateful that you don't shy away from that and that you engage your listeners and the entire network across the country with that. So thank you for that. And then to your question, Isaac, the whistleblower issue here in D.C., and whistleblowers and whistleblower protection has been around for a long time. The problem is even that's been weaponized and politicized. And, going back to the whistleblowing that's been celebrated during the last administration by mainstream and establishment types. Now whistleblowers come out with actual concrete facts instead of just conjecture, and they're criminalized. And then the mainstream media and establishment types just, throw them under the bus or ignore them, which, I've heard it said the greatest power media has is the power to ignore. Stories that should be bombshells are being ignored by mainstream types. But we're still doing everything we can, and I know you are too, to get the word out and make sure Americans know what's happening. But the problem, for starters, whistleblower protection, in the name of the statute, No Fear Act, and Whistleblower Protection Enhancement Act of 2012, just like so many things in D.C. are meant to give the impression that they are what they say they are, or what their title is. But so many times, like in George Orwell's 1984, what is named is actually the opposite of what it is or what it does. We have heard from a number of federal employees that everybody on the inside knows that the whistleblower protections are a farce, and that they know that if they come forward and do things like our two clients, Garret and Marcus Allen, which I know we're going to talk about today, had the spine to do and the courage and the bravery to do, and they're paying the price for it. All these others know that if they do that, what's happening to our clients will happen to them. And it's easy for us to sit back and say, well, you got to do the right thing, right? Well, that's hard when, you're a single income family and you have young children, right? I mean, we can get pious about what all these agents should be doing, but the consequences are real and they're severe. And as our client testified, these agencies will crush you if you dare to stand against their agenda or speak up or that kind of thing. And so the whistleblower part of what we want to accomplish is reform of the whistleblower protection laws. There's a role for Congress in that. There's also a role for Article 3 courts. And that's part of what, I know we're going to get into more detail on that, but that's part of what we want to accomplish for our clients and for their peers with these cases.
That is, wow, that is a great setup. And this is such an important thing that we're talking about. Sam, I just want to go to you real quickly before the break, because some people listening, they know that we talk a lot about biblical worldview, about God-fearing citizens, patriotism, and maybe they're thinking, well, is it really something we should be doing to be telling on somebody else, or something like that? What do we have biblically to say? It is right to stand up for justice. It is right, even for a lesser magistrate, to stand up against somebody higher than him or her who's doing things wrong. Is there any biblical foundation that we could turn to?
Well, Isaac, we only got about a minute here, but there is a basis for it, and I'm going to go right here. Romans chapter 13. Covered it yesterday on this on this program. We talked about this, but Romans 13 says, "Let every soul be subject under the higher powers. There's no power but of God. The powers that be are ordained of God." Subject means literally to be subordinated to a higher authority. A biblical worldview, our founders had it, said God is at the top. There's the individual. There's mom and dad. There are those in government, civil authority, and there are those in the church. They all are there by God, ranked. They work together according to God's plan. Their purpose is one thing: glorify God, magnify and do what He says, punish those who break the law as defined by God, and praise those and protect those who keep the law. Ultimately, every person in authority, Isaac, has that same duty to do that. Whistleblowers are a sub-portion of what we're talking about. And we'll build this out as we get further into the program today.
Well, thank you, Tam. Thank you, Sam and Ben. We're going to go to our first break here from some of our partners and come back. When we come back, we're going to be talking with attorney Ben Sisney from the ACLJ about two cases in particular of whistleblowers. I think it is going to be very informative, very eye-opening as we look at this and look at the biblical response to this and protecting whistleblowers and how we need to stand up for justice. So we're going to be right back on Stand in the Gap today.
Expressing gratefulness is not only essential for God's blessing, it's God's antidote to pride. So can I invite you to be grateful with us? In just 10 years, God's grown APN from a mere vision to now reaching millions every day with God's Word and a biblical worldview. We're so grateful. We're also thankful for you who've partnered in prayer or finances along the way. Now, can I ask you to be grateful to God? Bless us and others by writing a note sharing how God's used Stand in the Gap radio and TV in your life. Share your thankfulness online or simply send a letter like Mary did from Ohio. She said, "Your combining of biblical truth with the news of the day's done more to keep me and my family informed and prepared than any source of news I've ever found. Thank you, thank you." So just like Mary, will you share your thanks with us? Gratefulness is contagious, brings God's blessing, and encourages others. Thank God with us. Send a letter or go to standinthegapmedia.org.
Does your child struggle to learn in a traditional classroom setting? Do you find yourself wishing you could spend more time interacting with and training them in the ways of the Lord? Thousands of parents feel the same way, and that's why they've chosen to educate their children at home. This gives them the tremendous opportunity to not only ensure a biblical worldview education, but to instill Christian values and build stronger relationships along the way. If this sounds like something you're looking for, why not consider BJU Press Homeschool Resources? BJU Press offers a variety of programs tailored to meet your family's needs and accommodate your child's learning style. Their curriculum was created to challenge your child to think biblically and grow in godly wisdom while receiving an academically sound education. They offer traditional homeschool textbooks, online classroom, and distance learning. Take charge of your child's future by using BJU Press materials. Learn more at bjupress.com. That's bjupress.com.
With a 1-minute look at culture from a Christian worldview, I'm John Stonestreet with A Point. Recently in the New York Times, Catherine Pearson noted how the growing cultural stigma against boredom burdens parents. Research shows that parents across cultural and economic lines believe it's their job to fend off their kids' boredom with all kinds of activities. But doing so implicitly teaches kids that boredom is bad for them and entertainment is a right. This plays well in our age that treats any discomfort as dangerous and that having fun, or at least avoiding suffering, as the meaning of life. This understanding of life just robs kids, however, of finding the joy, the meaning, and the truth of self-sacrifice, of service to others, of devotion to things bigger than ourselves. It's also cruel to teach kids who live in a fallen world that suffering and discomfort can be avoided and that you can't truly be happy if you fail to avoid it. Allowing kids to be bored and uncomfortable, on the other hand, teaches them that they actually will be able to handle tough things with God's help. For the Colson Center, I'm John Stonestreet with The Point.
So can your child spiritually succeed in school? The Apostle Paul addressed this challenge to young Timothy when he wrote in 1 Timothy 4:12, "Let no one despise your youth, but set the believers an example in speech, in conduct, in love, in faith, in purity." Hello, I'm Sam Rohrer with the American Pastors Network and another Stand in the Gap Minute. The greatest test of your child's faith will be to live it out at school. When Paul taught Timothy to set an example through his speech and actions, he knew that this young man's life would impact others. Whether to a classmate or a teacher, the words our children use display their attitude. Their actions come next. Together, their speech and actions determine their example, and that example can be powerful. Parents and grandparents, your words and choices set a powerful example for them too. Make a renewed effort to set the highest possible standard for your words and actions. Your children will be encouraged to do the same. Sign up and stand with us at AmericanPastorsNetwork.net.
You're listening to Stand in the Gap today. For more information, visit our website at standinthegapradio.com.
Welcome back to the program, and Sam Rohrer and myself are talking with our friend and attorney from the American Center for Law and Justice, ACLJ. You could go online, aclj.org, and find out a lot of information of what's going on as they stand up for God-given rights, for God-fearing people. But so Attorney Ben Sisney is with us, and we've been talking about whistleblowers and the Whistleblower Act. And there's a couple of whistleblowers in the federal government that law enforcement folks that are really patriots. Both of these examples are people who have served our country very well in the military with, in very honorable ways, and then served in other ways. And now they're facing retaliation, retribution. We'll get into that. But could you tell us about the first person? This is Garret O'Boyle. He's been a whistleblower. Could you just maybe talk to us a little about maybe some of his background, agency he worked for, and what he was reporting?
Absolutely. Thanks again for having us on so we can discuss these important things. So Garret O'Boyle is a special agent for the FBI. And as you were indicating before that, he served, was a combat veteran and decorated. And then he, as you indicated, he served in law enforcement as a police officer, and then just continuing his courageous career of serving our nation in those ways. He joined the FBI, and he was doing well. I want to be clear about that. This is to the extent that the other side tries to paint these folks as like disgruntled employees or something like that, to try to belittle it or disregard it. He was doing well. He was climbing. In fact, part of the tragedy of what's happened to him, he had just received a promotion. They had moved him and his young family. I believe his wife was still pregnant at the time, and since the child has been born, but moved his young family across the country for promotion. On day one, he checks in. They walk him into a room and tell him, "We suspended your security clearance." The facts speak for themselves. I mean, the vindictiveness of what they did to him, and so they made some false allegations against him, which he's vigorously denied, and so it turns out he had been making protected disclosures. That's a legal term of art under the whistleblower laws, and had made a number of them, and of course, these agencies don't like being told on. They don't like having what they're doing that's questionable or whatever be brought to light. So they punish him. They suspend his security clearance. And I'm going to explain why that's important to understand, because then, shortly thereafter, then they suspend his employment. And here's why this sequence of events matters. So in the FBI, apparently having a security clearance is a required element of your job. It's not hard to understand or wrap your mind around that. And if that gets suspended, then, you're not qualified to continue in your employment. Well, the problem is the way some case law and the whole interaction between court jurisprudence and statutes over the years, going back to 1988 in a Supreme Court decision called U.S. Department of the Navy versus Egan, been applied by courts and expanded basically for the proposition that if the agency suspends an employee's security clearance and then suspends them from their employment, you don't really, that employee doesn't have judicial remedies available, because the review process is not allowed to look behind the suspension of the security clearance in the first place. So we can't get to the suspension from your employment because we don't have the authority to look at the reason that your security clearance was suspended in the first place. So whether that was, retaliatory or vindictive or otherwise in violation of the whistleblower or other employment regulations or laws, you're just kind of on your own. There's nothing we can do about it. And so they just leave you. Then they leave you in the suspended state until you basically go bankrupt or give up and just quit. And the remedies that are supposed to be available and that everyone is led to believe are available to employees in the situation are in fact not available in a meaningful way. And so that's exactly what happened to Garret O'Boyle. The administrative court said, I can't look at that. They suspended your clearance, so I'm not even going to hear arguments about it. And so in that specifically, that's one of the things we're appealing to the U.S. Court of Appeals for the D.C. Circuit. We just filed his appeal, I believe, late Friday. And we're going to take it to an Article III court. That's a court set up by the Constitution. And we're going to take it all the way to the Supreme Court, because the Supreme Court needs to either overturn or significantly narrow this Egan decision. This was 1988. So much is different now. The laws changed. The history of agency abuse of constitutional rights of its employees and American citizens. This could be multiple shows. So I think we have talked about some of this on your show before. Is every day there's just this constant drip of agency abuse, and especially the particular agency of the FBI. And I want to be clear, I'm not the FBI as a whole serves an important purpose, and the agents and the folks, men and women on the ground, protecting us, fighting crime, protecting our national interests. This isn't about them. In fact, this is actually to help them and to help rehabilitate the FBI, to provide us accountability in the sunlight that they've been able to avoid. And, shocking breaking news, agencies don't like having to be accountable. It's kind of a human nature thing multiplied, and you add power and multiply it times a bunch of people and put them in an office and give them big titles and a lot of power. They don't like it. The human nature thing, and the leadership resists. But we're going to keep pushing, keep fighting. And like I said, to the Supreme Court, and we're going to be working to get the Supreme Court to reevaluate this. And we're going to be, Congress has a role here too. And it's time for Americans to pony up, get serious about this. Stop sitting back and saying, man, I don't like these abuses in D.C., but there's nothing we can do about it. Yes, there is. We're doing it. We need our supporters. We need people who care to engage. Let your congressmen and women know. Pay attention to these things. They matter. They actually affect all of us.
And Ben,
Sam,
go ahead, Isaac.
Sam.
Go ahead, there.
I'm just trying to look at the time here. So, what Ben is saying, it really affects all of us as patriotic, God-fearing people. Sam, when we talk about biblical worldview, we just our last Friday program, we were interviewing a pastor who was speaking to law enforcement officers who were afraid to stand up for what was right. They sat there while drag queen people were subverting children, doing things that would be like at a strip club. And meanwhile, there were Nazis and other gays, even gay groups protesting it, but it was the Christians that were out there praying that got arrested. And so he went and he tried to pose with the police officers, say, look, just because the mayor tells you this is what you should do, that doesn't mean you should do it. He was being very calm. I thought extremely calm as a father whose teenage daughter had just been unlawfully arrested, from what I could see in the videos and hear about it. But here today, we're talking about somebody, lesser magistrate, a law enforcement officer who did interpose on behalf of what was right, what was just, and did shed light on what he was showing, things about pro-lifers being targeted and things like that. Sam, why is it important that men and women in our law enforcement, especially in these federal agencies, that they are able to report corruption? That's that interposition of lesser magistrates we talk about so much. Why should they be able to do that without retaliation, without having to fear this reporting of the truth?
Well, Isaac, in some respects, I can say you answered your own question, and Ben answered his own question. I mean, what we're talking about, because this is what our founders said. Our founders said this. William Penn here in Pennsylvania, where I sit, was very clear about this. He said that when people go into government, if you did not put people in government who had a fear of God, lived according to God's 10 Commandments, that's what Penn said, and you did not have the citizens do that, you would have end up in then, therefore, a tyrannical government. The bottom line is, under a biblical worldview, we know that the heart of man is not tended to good. The heart of man is tended to selfishness and greed. And when that is the case, when coupled together with positions of power, civil authority and otherwise, it is doubled. It's put on steroids, because now we can take the law, what Romans 13 talks about, the sword that's given to government, to God's given to government, the enforcement of the law, it actually becomes empowered. And when it's empowered by a greedy person who lusts after power, lusts after money, which is what the Bible says happens, we know through history, if that is not restrained, you end up having a government that attacks those who do right and coddles the criminal. That is what God says. That is what the Bible says. So all the way through history, as our founders said, they put checks and balances into the system to guard against that. Where we are now is that you have too many in the various branches of government, legislature, working with the executive branch. The FBI, the DOJ, that's the executive branch. When they work together and they find they can actually help each other in the process fulfill that greed, you have exactly what happens right now. That's why the whistleblower law was put into effect as a check and balance. It's that simple.
Well, it sounds so simple, but for these cases that are going on that the ACLJ is getting involved with, it's not simple for those families, for those folks. We have another person we want to talk about with Ben Sisney when we come back from this brief timeout. I want to talk about another whistleblower, another case, a travesty against justice, somebody trying to stand for what is right. More to come here on Stand in the Gap today.
Hi, this is Bill Koenig of World Watch Daily from Washington, D.C. I commend Sam Rohr for airing this Stand in the Gap radio program on the American Pastors Network. Sam and his team of Dave, Gary, and Isaac offers a wide variety of guests that discuss the important and relevant issues that keep Christians informed and engaged. As a White House correspondent for the past 17 years, I have appreciated the opportunity to share what I'm observing in our country and the platform to discuss the biblically significant times that we are living in regarding Israel, the Middle East, and other key places around the world.
With the newspaper in one hand and the Word of God in the other, and with analysis from our team of preachers, combined with expert guests like Bill Koenig, Congresswoman Michelle Bachmann, George Barnett, Constitutional Attorney David New, IQ Abrasuli, and many more, with God's guidance and your financial and prayer support, the Stand in the Gap Today team is quickly becoming the most trusted source of news. Pray for us. Stand with us.
Only 2 foundations. This is Ken Ham, CEO of Answers in Genesis, Creation Museum, and Ark Encounter. When it comes to the foundation for your worldview, there's only 2 choices, man's word or God's word. You'll either start with God and His word as your ultimate authority, or you'll start with the ideas of man. Now, every day in our public schools, children are being taught to start with man's word. That man, our ideas, our feelings, what makes us happy, is the ultimate authority. Now, many parents and churches try to give kids a Christian worldview, but without the right foundation, it'll collapse. And the child will build a worldview consistent with their foundation, man's word. Parents, give your children the right foundation, God's word.
There's so much more to discover about worldviews at AnswersRadio.com, and visit the Ark Encounter, where kids 10 and under are free this year. Go to AnswersRadio.com.
Did you know that since 2017, Stand in the Gap's been airing a nationwide weekly television program? Viewers report that they never miss a program. One father shared how he's been using one TV series entitled Principles of National Renewal for his homeschool students' government and economics class. What a great way to combine excellent programming with instruction of the next generation about our nation's godly heritage and our biblical civic responsibilities. Whether this issue or any of the wide range of potential themes and subjects, every one of them reflects a thoroughly biblical worldview, excellently presented and biblically accurate. You can easily find Stand in the Gap TV across America on such networks as Lighthouse TV, Dove TV, VCY America, most all cable networks, and now internationally on Albanian TV Channel 7. Archive TV programs can also be found on our website at standinthegapmedia.org or on our YouTube channel under Stand in the Gap TV.
You're listening to Stand in the Gap today, discussing the pressing issues facing our culture from a biblical and constitutional perspective. Now let's rejoin our host.
Well, thanks again for tuning in. If you're just now tuning in on this program, we've been talking with attorney Ben Sisney from ACLJ. And before we go back to him and talk about another whistleblower and some of the things going on and some of the things that the ACLJ is doing to get the truth out there and to find out what the truth is so they can expose more corruption. But before we go there, I want to just talk about some of our resources that we have here at the American Pastors Network. So I'll ask our program producer, Tim, if you could, if you're around and can come to the mic, stop what you're doing and just give us some updates on some of the information and resources we have here at the American Pastors Network.
Hi, thank you very much, Isaac, and good afternoon to everybody. Hopefully you're having a great day. I want to let you know about some things that are happening behind the scenes here at the American Pastors Network that you will find useful. You've been hearing us talk about it. Our 10th anniversary celebration is coming up here in November, a couple months away. It's slowly coming here, but it'll be here before you know it. We are 10 years old here at APN, American Pastors Network, and we want to celebrate and reflect everything that the Lord has done and how He's blessed us. So we're going to have an event on November 14th, Tuesday, November 14th. And right now, if you go to our site, AmericanPastorsNetwork.net/forging ahead. You'll be able to find more information about the event and what's happening. Right now, we're still just kind of making you all aware of what's going on, and pretty soon we'll be allowing you to sign up for this event, and it's going to be happening, like I said, once again, Tuesday, November 14th, here in central Pennsylvania, and we're going to have the guests, the Honorable Michelle Bachman and Dr. George Barna, very regularly guests on here, and very good speakers, and we're going to have a great evening of just reflecting on what the Lord is doing. So put that in your calendar if you're in the area or if you desire to want to come, and there'll be more information coming here soon. Also, like I just mentioned, we have two great websites, AmericanPastorsNetwork.net and StandInTheGapMedia.org. Lots of great information to find. If you go to our AmericanPastorsNetwork.net, you'll be able to sign up for our e-newsletter. We send out e-newsletters maybe a couple times a month about information. We'll send a recap email about the previous week's radio programs and some cool other things like a transcript that you can read of the program and some podcast Q&As of a previous week's program, usually one of our weekend programs, but that's included usually every week. And we'll send you a prayer request email once a quarter or other information happening. If you sign up for our e-newsletter at AmericanPastorsNetwork.net, please do that. We also encourage you to please pray for this ministry. Nothing happens without prayer. And as more as we see the days going as they are, we need to be praying. We need to be those prayer warriors that are putting on our armor and praying for things. And we covet your prayers here at the American Pastors Network. And so please pray for this ministry, and we appreciate that. Also, if the Lord has blessed you through this ministry, please consider giving financially to us. We appreciate that. If whatever amount you want to give, no amount too big, no amount too small, is too much. And especially while it's still here in the summer, giving is down a lot of times during the summer, but please don't forget us in your giving. And as we see us going into the fall, we're going to continue to do what the Lord has called us to do. So lots of things happening here, Isaac, but you got lots going on here and interesting conversation about whistleblowers. So I'm going to go ahead and send it on back to you.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Tim. And just to say, what you said about praying for our ministry, praying for others like ACLJ, it's so important. Last night at our midweek, or not last night, but on Wednesday night, our midweek service at the church I pastor in northern Pennsylvania, one of the things we were praying about was for these two men that we're talking about on today's program, for Garret and Marcus, praying for them and for their families, that the Lord would provide, that the Lord would give wisdom to ACLJ, to the lawyers involved, as we pray on a regular basis for our different magistrates, from the president right on down to our local sheriff and other local offices. When we find out about these cases like this, it is, something we're called to do, is to be informed so we can be praying and seeking God's will about it and seeking how we can help. So, Ben, let's talk about the second whistleblower. And again, probably some of our listeners maybe are figuring this out, but these are cases that are going on right now. We're not talking about something that happened in the past and kind of looking through it, right? We're looking at something going on right now in the present. So I understand and appreciate that you have to be very careful just presenting some of the facts, just like you do in court, without getting into a lot of detail, because these are current cases. And so maybe you could tell us some, I don't know how much you can tell us, but about the very, very current situation of FBI staff operations specialist Marcus Allen. What did he do? What kind of retaliation is he facing?
Yeah, absolutely. And I appreciate the understanding. And these are ongoing and they are weighty in nature, to say the least. So I appreciate that. But yeah, so Marcus Allen, just like for Garret O'Boyle, we joined up with our friends at the Banal Law Group, another law firm that's engaged in these, and to represent Garret. And we're happy to do that. For Marcus Allen, we joined up with the organization Empower Oversight, which is another organization engaging these issues head on, and we're happy to join up with them. Marcus, an FBI official. He was a decorated Iraq War veteran. So another, you may be noticing the common thread here. These are American-loving patriots who have put their money where their mouth is, and deserve the utmost respect and gratitude from our nation, and particularly from our own nation's government. And they're continuing to serve, and even coming back from active war zones. And so he was decorated then. He was decorated after he joined the FBI too. He won Employee of the Year, the FBI. So again, this is the quality of individual we're talking about here, not just disgruntled employees, with an axe to grind, right? And but he dared to speak up and stand against the things that he saw. I'm not going to get into those now, but he he had the courage and the bravery that you would expect with someone of his record and caliber. And how is he rewarded by the agency? Basically the same thing. And then also, I think as he told Congress, so both of these whistleblowers and some others made national headlines. You may remember into May, I believe, early June, for some of their just explosive testimony in Jim Jordan's committee over there at the House. And one of the things that Marcus said, well, I'm just going to read it. Despite my history of unblemished service to the United States, the FBI suspended my security clearance, accusing me of actually being disloyal to my country. And then, I quote, the FBI questioned my allegiance to the United States. And think about that for a second. I know silence on air is not great, but just I want to let that sink in. With a man of this record, and then this is what the FBI accuses him of and does to him, because he saw something that was not right, and he had the backbone to do something about it in a manner the law supposedly protects. And this is what happens to him. So we're going to bat for him too. There's some complexities in this case we're working through. I appreciated the comment you made a minute ago. These men, their families, men and women, they need prayer, and I'm just going to be real candid. They need provision. They're in some tough spots here, and they need provision and they need protection. Frankly, they just need encouragement, and you know, prayer. Prayer is the start, but we got to put our prayer into action too, and be willing to be used. And so I would just encourage your listeners to think about that. And you know, remember too, Garret O'Boyle's comments that really I think made some headlines too, was the FBI will crush you and they'll crush your family. This is not right. I know we're on the same page here, but I mean, just think about this in the context that this is happening in, and what is the resistance to? Accountability. And this is an agency with tremendous power. And I would actually submit that it should be. That's the thing here. You got to understand, just speaking for myself, I'm a pretty pro-national security guy, right? And you know, I'm willing to give the benefit of the doubt whenever I can to law enforcement, federal, state, local. And again, I just want to emphasize to the extent it could be, you know, opponents would characterize this as being sort of like anti-American or anti-law. No, it's the exact opposite. The exact opposite. Not to mention the biblical principles that y'all are talking about here as well that are at play and the importance of all of this. But there is some serious stuff going on here in our country. It's a big deal to my bosses, Jay and Jordan Seculo. Thrilled that here at the ACLJ we're able to engage this. And candidly, I'm thrilled that I get to talk about it with you and share this with your listeners. This is important stuff.
Ben, let me just a quick comment. We're about out of time here, but you know what you are talking about is very, very clear. Justice has fallen in the streets. That is a biblical term. When the Department of Justice, the executive branch of which it sits, and this agency chooses to make their own law and not follow the law as written, you have no longer justice. You have what's taking place. I am thankful that you and your team are defending these brave men. And it's going to become more costly, I believe. We see it. You use the word weaponization. I think it's a good word. Just a short answer is all we have here, but whistleblowers and what is known as FOIA or Freedom of Information Act request kind of go together. You guys have used that very, very well. Could you just define and link those two and how they work together to help accountability?
Absolutely. Freedom of Information Act requests, we've been doing that here at the ACLJ for, I'd say, 7 or 8 years now, and that's another mechanism of accountability. I think we've talked about some of our discoveries on your show that have made some headlines, and that is a public right to know. The statutes give Americans the right to know what their government is doing, our government is doing. And with the old concept of sunlight is the best of disinfectants, right? And so we've litigated against it. I've got multiple cases in front of the FBI right now, including one where the FBI just told the federal court they found 1,200 pages of documents responsive to our FOIA request about them surveilling Catholic churches in Richmond. 1,200 pages of documents when they told us it was just one memo.
It is so important what you are doing, and these freedom of information, these reports that are coming out. We want to finish up. We're taking our last break right now. We'll come back and talk more about the Freedom of Information Act, and we'll be right back on Stand in the Gap today.
From the time our children are born until the moment they leave our homes as young adults, Christian parents are given the privilege and responsibility of guiding them into a personal relationship with Jesus Christ. All during their growing years, they're influenced by the people and events around them. Sometimes these are out of our control, but many times we can make choices as to how they'll be educated, what church they'll attend, and the overall atmosphere of our home. If you've decided your child is best influenced by a biblical worldview education, you'll want to consider BJU Press homeschool materials. Dedicated to academic excellence, BJU Press offers a curriculum that not only assists you to pass along your values to your children, but makes it easy and affordable. The decisions made in response to the challenges and opportunities your child will face in life are largely determined by their internal spiritual compass. Is your child ready for the journey? Find out more at bjupress.com. That's bjupress.com.
For years, faithful Christians formed nonprofit foundations or trusts to preserve their ability to generously give to their favorite causes or ministries, even after their death. The problem? Professional managers, pressure from left-wing agendas, and even family members with opposing views hijacked the original donor intent. This is sad but true. But this subversion of purpose can be prevented. Hello, I'm Sam Rohr of the American Pastors Network, and I'm glad to recommend Capstone Legacy Foundation in Wayne, Pennsylvania, an experienced and capable Christian community foundation. Established to help you set up a ministry, a giving structure guaranteed not to be hijacked, or a place you can donate cash or non-cash assets like stocks, bonds, or property. Capstone's designed to help you achieve immediate tax savings and give you needed time to decide how to prayerfully allocate your giving. Contact Capstone at 610-688-8890 or visit them at capstonelegacy.org.
Here's Twyla Brace with today's Health Freedom Minute.
The left wants to put America under global control through the World Health Organization's international health regulations. Using the Pandemic Act within the Defense Act of 2023, Democrat leadership in Congress did their part. But ultimately, state governors can refuse unconstitutional demands of Congress. As happened in Florida, states can refuse to follow federal or international demands during a pandemic, and sheriffs can refuse to enforce a governor's unconstitutional dictates. Elections determine how much power outsiders get over your state and your country. Notably, the Pandemic Act within the Defense Act ends in September 2027, unless Congress renews it. So vote with that in mind in 2024.
Help us secure health freedom for all. Visit cchfreedom.org. That's cchfreedom.org.
I'm Todd Morris with Mission Network News. India's Karnataka state changes in favor of Christians. Newly elected officials overturned a statewide anti-conversion law. A dozen other states in India have these on the books. Todd Nettleton with the Voice of the Martyrs USA says these laws are used to persecute Christians. The Congress party is set to replace them with a new bill in the coming months. Pray these new rules will support religious freedom. What if you are the only Christian in your community? Sat7 began its media ministry in the Middle East, North Africa region to share the gospel and serve isolated believers. The ministry provides theological education programming as well as counseling lines for viewers to call. Sat7 receives 1,000 reactions from its audience every day. If you speak Arabic, Farsi, or Turkish, Sat7 could use your help responding to these messages. We'll connect you at missionnews.org, a service of One Way Ministries.
You're listening to Stand in the Gap today. For more information, visit our website at standinthegapradio.com.
Welcome back to the program. I'm Isaac Crockett, and Sam Rohr and I are talking with attorney Ben Sisney with the ACLJ, and we've been looking at whistleblowers and at some retaliation that's been happening towards very patriotic men who have served their country in literally in time of war, and now also as in the FBI, and for things that they're doing, just trying to take a stand for what is right. In some cases, not even realizing they were making themselves a target. Are being targeted, being retaliated against. They are not being paid, so they're trying to provide for their wives and children, and now this is happening. And so it's very important. We need to be aware of it. We need to know how to pray for them. And I just want to read from an article that was on aclj.org, written by Jay and Jordan Sekulow. Ben, your good friends and your co-workers there. And it says, we're mobilizing a legal team to directly engage more of these cases, as whistleblowers are a critical element of the legal defense of our constitutional republic. There you have it. They are a critical element legally to defending our constitutional republic. And so, Ben, as we wrap this up, you were talking about Freedom of Information Act and these things that you are filing for just real recently, something that they were trying to pretend was not a big deal, nothing there. You said you found out by getting the Freedom of Information Act, by using that to get the actual records, you found 1,200 pages, I think. Could you talk a little bit about how important it is that sort of work that's going on?
Absolutely. And it was basically in this lawsuit, the FBI just told the federal court down the street here in Washington that they had so far, and they're still searching, by the way, found 1,200 pages of responsive document to our FOIA request. The FOIA request sought documents about the story that the FBI memo that came out, that the FBI was surveilling, I believe even placed an undercover agent in a Catholic church. By the way, without evidence of actual wrongdoing, but based on this theory that because they're, very conservative Catholics and follow the Latin Mass and it's, that they're therefore security threats to the nation. Think about that for a second. Security threats to the nation, because, gosh, they also tend to be pro-life. Which actually ties back to something that Garret O'Boyle pointed out. One of the things that he brought to light was the when he found out that following the Dobbs decision that overturned Roe versus Wade, which I think we talked about on your show, the FBI mobilized to, protecting the Supreme Court. There was threats on justices and so forth. The FBI started saying, well, yeah, so we better start investigating the pro-life people because they're a threat. And Garret, wait a second. Pro-lifers aren't the ones that I'm going to be a threat to at the Supreme Court right now. They're quite happy with the decision. So even if you follow that radical chain of reasoning, it was absurd to investigate pro-lifers as threats to the Supreme Court following Dobbs. It makes no sense. So anyway, they were surveilling this Catholic church in Richmond. It was a memo. Attorney General Garland and I think Chris Wray, the FBI director, this is just this one-time, rogue agent. This is horrible. Well, don't worry. Trust us. We're taking a look. We'll get to the bottom of it. But this is like a one-off, right? Well, it turns out that there's reason to think there was other FBI field officers engaged in this too. I believe at least one out of Portland. And then, a week later, FBI is forced because of our FOIA lawsuit to tell federal court, we found 1,200 pages that are responsive to this FOIA request. And if you look at our FOIA request, which you can get on our website, we're posting this article here shortly with these links. If it's responsive to one of our requests, that tells you something. And if there's 1,200 pages of that, my goodness, I think this is going to be a story that we're going to be talking about in conjunction with all these other issues. But to your underlying point, gentlemen, the Freedom of Information Act is there. We can use it. And we do to shine light. And it's a means of accountability. And look, we're outside the government. There's things that we can't do. But letting our people, our listeners, our viewers, your listeners and viewers know what's going on helps equip them. And, of course, it's up to all of us as individuals to do something about it and to let our voices be heard to our elected representatives and with our votes. But it's the opportunity, it's information. And man, information, who controls information has the power, right? And this is a means that we have, and we've got to use it. We are, but then to the whistleblower side of public accountability, when we do a FOIA request, we represent ourselves and we litigate it, and we're kind of our own client, so to speak. We litigate that, and we take it all the way and get everything we can out of that to share with the American people. Now we're representing FBI agents and some complex and weighty judicial situations. And it's kind of the next big step, if that makes sense. It's all government accountability, but this is almost like taking it to the next level. Jay and Jordan, this is a big deal to them. This is critical. They are engaged on this. This is the battle we're going to be fighting. He's mobilized a legal team, including others that I worked with Jay and Jordan, representing a former president. And so we're not playing around, and we're not going anywhere. And this is the next big step for us. We encourage anybody that wants to learn more about it to go check out our website, aclj.org. Listen to the Secular radio show. It's on every day and streamed everywhere, all the platforms. And there's a lot of information going on. And I know it can be overwhelming. Trust me, I know. I do this for a living. But we've got to engage. We have to. You're doing that. We are grateful, and we're grateful to get to talk about it with you all.
Well, and that is so true. Christians being engaged. In Luke chapter 12, Jesus said, "To whom much is given, much is also required." And we've been given so much because of the blood, sweat, and tears of our forefathers, of the generations that came before us, the people who really did trust in God. And we need to be stewards of that freedom that we've been given. We need to be involved. We need to be aware. I'm just reading from an email that came from Jay Sekulow. I think it came out this morning. He says that the Biden's FBI is placing spies in churches and targeting Christians as terrorists, just like you said. And he says, I've never seen anything like what we're facing today, battling a Mount Everest of attacks on faith in court. And I think that kind of sums up what we're hearing from you, what you're telling us today. It's explosive. I think you used the word for it. It's eye-opening, and it's frontline news. This is stuff that you hear a little bit about, but to fully understand it, to know what's going on, is important for God-fearing people. And Sam, how does this work? You've for 10 years, the Lord has used you to take you as a minister of civil government and bring you in to work with pastors, which you did while you were in office all those decades. But 10 years, American Pastors Network has been around. Radio, TV, podcast, different things has been something on your heart so that we could do like this program, so that we could find out the truth and make it known in the public square and respond to it with a biblical worldview. Can you kind of, I know we're running out of time here because I'd love to have you close our program in prayer, but can you kind of wrap some of this up by pointing us back to the Bible and explaining what you see here, and then, if time, close our program in prayer.
Isaac, yeah, you're right. There is not much time left. I think the only way to describe this as someone being in government and then we're on the outside and we're pointing people this way is to understand this. We are in the time of the world that Jesus talked about, where lawlessness we see increasing. No nation that turns their back on God and throws out the truth can even follow an oath, in our case, to uphold the Constitution. Right becomes wrong, wrong becomes right. We are in that spot, Isaac. So I think that for our listeners to understand, we are in a time where when we stand for truth, we will have to pay a price, but that's okay, because when Jesus came, he told the truth and he paid a price too. Let that not be a discouragement. Stand in the gap for truth where we are.
Amen. Amen. And for all of you, for Ben and Sam today, thank you for being on. All of you listening, thank you for listening. And I do pray that you will be able to stand in the gap wherever you are today for truth.
If you liked today's program, tell a friend. You'll also want to hear Stand in the Gap Weekend and watch the nationally syndicated Stand in the Gap TV program. We present the news of the day truthfully, carefully, and consistently from a biblical worldview and constitutional perspective. If you're hungry for the truth, visit standinthegapmedia.org to find all our programs and the stations that carry them. While you're there, be sure to download our free app and support this ministry with your best financial gift. Then join us again right here Monday through Friday for another program of Stand in the Gap Today.